and today I want to tell you about my Jodah Archmage Eternal deck. This is a modular deck that supports 4 different archetypes and playstyles. Big creatures, or aggro, extra turns, or spellslinger, slug, and hug. I made this deck to capture what I love about Magic, play some pet cards, and also to create a different experience each time that I play the deck. It's part love letter to the game and part party, so let's get into it. First, here are the core 80 cards that provide the structure that enable the other 4 20-card packages to thrive. To start, we have 10 fetch lands, 10 dual lands, which all the fetches can find, Urborg, which fixes for swamps, the new cassette lands from the newest Zendikar set, a couple of Battle Bond lands, and then 7 lands that tap for ideally up to 5 colors. Now, if you need to not use the fetches and duels, and even some of the 5-color lands for budgetary reasons, or if your playgroup doesn't accept proxies, that's no problem. You can cut the fetch lands for slow fetches or the evolving wilds of the world. You can also just run more basics and a few more cards in the ramp section that will fix you. I also recommend shock lands and check lands in place of the duels. Next, ramp. As you can see, most of the ramp is pretty low to the ground. It's basically 1 or 2 CMC. Some all-stars in this group are Bloomtinder, which when paired with Deathrite Shaman and Jodah can tap for Wooburg all on its own. Dockside Extortionist scales up in power level if you're playing with a more powerful pod. It can also go infinite in some circumstances with Emil the Blessed, which we run in this deck mainly for protection, but also for the upside of Dockside. Smothering Tithe pairs really well with our draw package. Fist of Suns is just sort of a Jodah effect that you can play a turn earlier. Something else to notice is that Deathrite pairs very well with your fetch lands, and Lotus Cobra does too. Next, draw and tutors. So here you can see we've got the pretty standard suite of pretty powerful 1 CMC tutors, as well as Demonic Tutor, which, as you can see, I'm a big fan of. I love that early art. Sylvan Library, Heuristic Study, just staples. They'll draw you a lot of cards. They'll help you find what you need. Emergent Ultimatum is a really interesting tutor that typically you want to pair with Omniscience. So if you resolve it, you want to find Omniscience as one of the 3 monocolored cards, because that will basically guarantee that your opponents give you the other 2 cards to cast for free. Necropotence and Peer into the Abyss are just fantastic raw cards that let you draw as much as you're willing to based on your current greed level. Valakut Awakening I'm testing. I like that it's instant speed, it replaces itself, and potentially can flex into the spot of a land if you need it. Windfall, Dark Deal, Time Spiral, Wheel of Fortune. As you can see, there's a bit of a wheel sub-theme here. They're just sort of unparalleled cards in terms of card advantage, but they also pair extremely well with these 3 pieces of payoff. Alms Collector, Notion Thief, and Consecrated Sphinx. These can basically break parity and make sure that you're drawing more cards than your opponent, while also giving you some just decent bodies to attack and or block with. Next, board wipes and removal. So here we've got some removal and board wipes. As you can see, this core 80 is really light on spot removal, and it's pretty non-interactive. It's mostly sorcery speed, but you can see that the cards are really selected for their efficiency and occasionally for how much they can break parity. Rift and Ruinous Ultimatum can be really devastating and game winning. I'm trying out Soul Shatter. I just like that it's instant speed and it kind of will hit the most valuable card typically your opponents control. Damnation and Wrath of God I just couldn't pass up. I just think they're such cleanly, beautifully designed cards with cool art. Toxic Deluge is fantastic because it can kill indestructible creatures, and Assassin's Trophy is basically the only piece of spot removal in the core 80, but I like the fact that it can just hit anything for 2 mana. Finally, value. And last but not least, we have probably my favorite effect in the history of the game, Omniscience. It's just so fun to resolve an Omniscience on turn 4 or turn 5 and then dump your hand and just keep going and going. This really is probably the biggest payoff spell in the deck, or at least in the core 80, and is essentially the deck's primary engine, because as long as you can resolve an Omniscience, typically this deck has a density of cards that will draw you more cards that will just keep you going and enable you to basically win on the same turn or set up and be able to protect yourself to win on the next turn. So let's jump into the first package, aggro, aka big creatures. Quick comments on all of them. Zakama comes down typically for 5 mana, pays for itself, and then is great removal on a stick. Pathbreaker Ibex pumps the team for a good alpha strike. Maelstrom Wanderer will often just cascade into value. Notably, if you hit a tutor like Vampiric Tutor or Mystical Tutor off the first cascade trigger, tutor, find Ruinous Ultimatum, because Maelstrom Wonder can cascade into it, and that often will win you the game. Blightsteel is just big scary beater. Kennen pairs very well with all the treasures you'll make off Smothering Tithe, and your dorks. Niv Mizzet is fantastic against Spellslinger or combo decks, and can ping down a lot of the opponent's dorks or their low CMC commanders. Niv also pairs very well with Nezahal, and both of them pair very well with Jin-Gitaxias. Elish Norn will keep your opponents off creatures, particularly blockers, and pump your team. Immercool will often just give you the game by taking over the turn of a combo player and either killing them or using them to hand you the game. Sakashima pairs very well with Shalai, and that'll give your creatures a hexproof lock. Runescarred Demon will tutor a card for some value. Gisela will double your damage and half the damage against you. She pairs very well with Avacyn. Those two will really give your creatures a commanding board presence. Nyxbloom Ancient is just general value for more ramp. Orin Frostfang is a new addition, but it draws you card and gives Death Touch, which pairs very well with Trample off the Pathbreaker Ibex. If you can find Jin-Gitaxias early and cheat it into play, it can often just win you the game. And then Kozilek. It's there for card draw, it's also there for Annihilator 4, and it can reshuffle your graveyard into your library, which can be a bit of a non-bow with that ultimatum, which returns all of your cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, but it can also find you some cards that you would really like to tutor and replay, which is nice. Lastly, Tooth and Nail and Defense of the Heart can find you various pairs that will help you deal with the board state and take care of any threats in the way that you need to. And Tooth and Nail notably can be cast for Wooburg off Jodah or Fist of Suns, and then you just pay an additional 2 mana to entwine it and cheat 2 creatures into play. Next up, Extra Turns. Now this is the package that in my local meta has the highest win rate. Turns can just be very oppressively good. So as you can see here, these are all extra turn spells. Approach of the Second Sun is typically this package's win condition. It's either that or you just plan to go on the commander damage beatdown plan with Jodah, which takes you about 16 turns, which isn't that undoable given our value cards, Double Vision and Swarm Intelligence. Swarm Intelligence in particular is pretty broken with any extra turn spell, particularly Expropriate. Teferi is just there, pairs very well with extra turn spells, and also can ultimate and give you 2 extra turns. Academy Rector, great to cheat out either Swarm Intelligence or Omniscience. Personal Tutor can find you Approach of the Second Sun. Aminatu's Augury can oftentimes net you at least 1 extra turn spell, and then maybe just some value off creatures, enchantments, artifacts, etc. And Sublime Epiphany is really just there because it felt thematic, and it's just a really solid instant that can do a lot. Next, Slug. Board wipes, extra board wipes. Season of the Witch and Disrupt Decorum force the action, force players to attack, which is great because we run Repercussion and this little guy Brash Taunter, which pairs really well with Starve Extinction and Blasphemous Act. Nothing like destroying all the creatures except this dude and doming somebody for 20. Treachery is free. If you cheat it out for Wooburg, it'll untap your lands most of the time. Rise of the Dark Realms and Insurrection. After all those board wipes, it's great to just steal all the creatures, give them haste, or just steal them, attack with them. Vilis and Karavek pair really nicely together. Counterintuitively, you can take all the Karavek triggers opponents playing low CMC spells because they're afraid of Karavek, point them at yourself with Vilis, and turn these two into a Yawgmoth's bargain, essentially. Wound Reflection, Havoc Festival pair together and kill opponents at their instep if they don't remove one of the 2. And then Fire Emancipation triples damage from sources you control, which is a lot of fun. Earthquake is there just for a big X spell. And Painful Quandary will put the screw on your opponents a little bit and make them make hard choices about discarding or losing life. Next and finally, Group Hug. So here we have a package that gets you into the late game very fast. Mana Doubler, Mana Doubler, Mana Doubler, card draw for your opponents and they can play an extra land. These 3 communal ramp spells pair very nicely with a Hive Mind. Claws of Gix, or Garras de Ix in this case, is there to really just sacrifice Hive Mind as part of the cost so that people don't abuse it. Eureka is one of those old busted reserve list cards that basically says, hey, everybody gets to put as many non-planeswalker permanents from their hand into play for free, and you just keep doing that until everybody's sick of it. Show and Tell is just a minor version of that. Tempting Worm lets your opponents do that, but not you, which is fine. And Hypergenesis you can cast for the alternate Jodah cost, and you don't have to suspend it. Seaborn Muse is fun to Fractured Identity, because then all your opponents will untap with each other. Boulder Heavyweights is also fun with Fractured Identity. Basically that means everybody's going to be tutoring a ton of creatures from their deck into play for free. Aether Snap and Divine Intervention are really just there to be a meme, draw the game in case people don't really want to seek the win anymore. Tidal Barracuda will give everybody flash and also protect you on your turn, so you can kind of set up your hug engine. And then Feldegriff pairs really nicely with Smothering Tithe and Omniscience. And how that works is you activate Feldegriff's ability to draw an opponent a card. That will trigger Smothering Tithe and bounce Feldegriff back to your hand. Now, if they don't pay for the treasure, that will let you keep doing this because you recast Feldegriff for free with Omniscience, use that treasure to activate the ability again, targeting the same opponent, drawing them a card, and repeating the loop ad infinitum. That way you can draw your opponents as many cards as they'd like. That's the deck. To pick which package or party you play, you can either roll a die, you can play the one that fits your mood, or you can let your opponents choose. For more synergies and explanations about individual card choices within the deck, you can visit my MTG Nexus primer. It's a little out of date, but you'll get the idea. Also, there are some Moxfield links down below too. As I say in my primer, I think that the essence of the bro isn't really a gender stereotype. The essence of the bro in my mind is just a love for partying, and this deck for me has been a party that I want to join over and over and over again. Thanks for watching.